It's time for the social show with Viwe Kyolwana.
Social show? Social show.
A very warm welcome to the Social Show. My name is Viwe Kyolwana, and maybe I should stop saying a very warm welcome because we are in the midst of summer and it's heating up in Johannesburg, but we've had some cold days. But anyway, as you know, the Social Show is your CSI, CSR, shared value one-stop shop, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. That's what we always talk about. That's what we pride ourselves in. I mean, come on. Anyway, if you have any queries or questions, please send us something on Brand Live's platforms, whether it be on Twitter or on Facebook, which is brandlive.coza, or you can just send me an email at press@social-tv.co.za. It's like maybe the second week, kind of November, and I don't know. I'm getting the Christmas flu. I'm already getting to the festivities of things, and I don't know about you. I actually want to know what it is that you are planning for Christmas. If you're going to be volunteering somewhere, giving away something, doing something good for your community. I know a lot of people going home. That's the South African thing where, you know, people leave their immediate homes where they grew up for the big city, and so when you're working in the big city, you end up going home for Christmas because you need to go show off what you've been doing. You need to go show off the kind of money you've been making. You need to go and just make sure that you are helping out the community that you grew up in. And a lot of people grow up in communities that they really want to help and that they need to help. And so that's what education is about. But anyway, we'll get into that another time. Let's go straight into the news.
CSI update.
News of a potential HIV cure had many on social media in a frenzy, but the maker of the drug has moved to temper expectations, saying more trials are needed and the process is still in its infancy. Israeli-based pharmaceutical company Xeon Medical, which recently broke the news of a successful first clinical trial for what they call the potential HIV cure, has issued a further statement on Twitter, making it clear that more trials needed to be done and that their official results will need to be published and peer-reviewed. Since the company made the announcement on the 31st of October, there's been a wave of excitement on social media in particular, with people clamoring for more information on the potential cure. Now, according to the World Health Organization, at the end of 2017, approximately 36.9 million people worldwide were living with HIV. And in a statement at the time, Xeon Medical announced the results of the first clinical trial of its HIV drug, Gamora, which the company said eliminated up to 99% of the HIV virus within 4 weeks of treatment. 9 HIV-infected patients took part in the Part 1 and Part 2 of the trial, and Dr. Ronald Barton Memorial in Entebbe over 10 weeks. But the company has moved to temper expectations, saying on Twitter that we want to thank everyone for their interest in the promising results of our first clinical trial. Like you, they are hopeful that Gamora may one day offer those affected with HIV a viable path to ridding themselves of the infection, but much work remains in this mission, including additional trials, publication of results, and steps required to make Gamora commercially viable. In other news, the African Development Bank is leading efforts to wake the sleeping giant that is the African savannah and turn it into the cradle of the continent's green revolution. Africa is host to 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, but currently spends an estimated $35 billion per year on importing food. This figure is projected to shoot up to $11 billion by 2025. Africa is importing what it should actually be producing: 22 million metric tons of maize, 2 million metric tons of soybean, and 1 million metric tons of broiler meats, and 10 million metric tons of milk product each year. This situation is made worse when African countries export raw goods outside the continent to be processed into consumer products imported back into Africa for purchase. In essence, Africa is exporting jobs outside the continent and contributing to Africa's poverty challenges. The African Development Bank has determined that African savanna can support the production of maize, soybean, and livestock, and transform the continent into a net exporter of these commodities. Only 10% of the African savanna is under cultivation. Better utilized small sections of Africa's grasslands could provide direct jobs for tens of millions of young people and indirect jobs for many more. And lastly, in our news, looking to making farming more attractive to South Africa's youth, SAB and AB InBev Africa have introduced its first group of urban farmers in Johannesburg inner city and surrounds with the installation of 3 200-meter rooftop farms addressing challenges of unemployment and food security. The project is facilitated by Youth Entrepreneurship Program SAB Kickstart in partnership with the City of Joburg, the Department of Small Business Development and the Small Enterprise Development Agency. The farm is situated on top of 1 Fox Street in Braamfontein and at Outreach, a foundation in Hillbrow, and they are run by 7 young and agri-entrepreneurs between the ages of 18 and 35. The rooftop farms are supported by a newly formed brand called Hola Harvest, under which they produce a wide range of fresh produce such as leafy vegetables, strawberries, chilies, and violet flowers. The produce will be sold to restaurants and local communities around Johannesburg Central, and the profits will go to the entrepreneurs themselves to assist them in managing the business. In addition, the farms have opened up opportunities for 3 agro-processors to run enterprises based on the produce they convert into condiments and sauces. And that concludes our news for today.
Imagine that you have $1.25. In the United States, you can have 5 bags of deep cheese and a pretzel. In London, you can have an instant soup. In India, you can have 2 steamed rice cakes. In Ghana, you can have a small box of chicken and rice. While you're imagining the tasty smell of that chicken and rice, 1.3 billion people around the world only have $1.25 to survive per day. They don't have a choice, but you do.
And this is getting back to an earlier discussion we had. Indra Nooyi said something that I agreed with so much, is that often people confuse purpose and corporate social responsibility. And I think it's really important when defining purpose for your organization, the role of the customer, the employee, the investor, and then you decide how far you're going to go on broader societal missions. And some organizations are set up explicitly around providing employment for coffee workers in the Amazon, right?
Yeah.
And they can have that purpose, but then they also have to figure out what the metrics are that they'll hold themselves accountable to. And so the piece that it makes me start thinking about is once you pick it, then you got to pick your metrics, right? So I think you can have as broad a purpose as you choose as an organization, but then you have to also hold yourself accountable. Is that attainable? Is that something I can move the needle on? And how am I going to hold myself accountable for doing that?
Yeah. Dave, how do you think
If you broaden this to look at social responsibility,
Yeah.
It becomes a little different animal, because in a company like ours, last year we spent $250 million in charitable gifts and contributions, donations, and different things like that. And that's consistent with the last several years. And Forbes called us the most charitable company in America, which we appreciated that recognition. But frankly, the contributions we make are directly related to our purpose as an organization, to what we're trying to achieve, and they are targeted at our customers, the communities we serve, and our associates. In fact, we went out and researched with our customers, what things do you think it's important for a grocery company like ours to participate in? And they told us things related to their community, their schools, because many of the people who shop in our stores have kids and they want us to relate to the schools. They think hunger problems and issues, so we support food banks all over the U.S. We make sure that what was otherwise wasted food, perishable food, now all gets donated through those services. We look at sustainability as important to our associates, so we really go after that in a big way. We've reduced our energy usage by 30% in the last 10 years on a square foot basis across our footprint. And I used to think of that as a fixed cost. For heaven's sakes, I was so wrong. But our associates said we can make a dent on this, and they wanted to go after it. So I think most of the goals that you think of as social and affecting the community as a whole need to relate back to what are you trying to do in your business, and does it make some sense? Now, if you're the sole owner of the business and you want to support something, fine, but your shareholders should insist that you spend the money in a way that furthers the business in a positive way. Now, it can help the community, certainly, and the $250 million does help the communities, but it helps Kroger at the same time.
Back on the social show, and today we had quite an interesting interview lined up with Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, who's a doctor at Adessa Clinic and lead consultant for Nalane, I think it's Nalane, for reproductive justice, basically global doctors for choice. And the conversation was really going to be around this new campaign, which is being promoted by RED and Durex. So RED is a global campaign and advocacy organization committed to ending the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Africa. And I thought it would be quite interesting to speak to them, especially on the brink of this new wave of the HIV, cure that has been sort of making the rounds on Twitter. But anyway, an exciting international partnership to address the global HIV/AIDS threat. Durex has partnered with RED and has announced actually that they will donate 5 million, which will be matched by the Gates Foundation for a total of 10 million to benefit various charities in Southern Africa via the Global Fund. 100% of the money is generated is going to go to the work on the ground. The grant aims to do three things, right? The first is reduce new HIV infections and among pregnant ladies as well as among young women, to improve access to sexual and reproductive health services and comprehensive sexuality education in schools, and also to encourage more girls to stay in education. Sort of creating and distributing Durex packs for sale worldwide, focused on raising sort of awareness and funds for the Global Fund. And that's basically what they're going to be doing for a couple of months, I think. I'm not sure when it's ending, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how they started it and when it was going to end, and how it was going to sort of be translated into the rest of Southern Africa. And it would have been quite a great example. I know that the Durex South Africa will also launch the Durex Red Bus that will drive sexual education in 11 key communities, in and around Gauteng. I know they had an activation in UJ and one in Soweto. I'm not really sure where. And basically what they want to do is just reach as many people as they can. Hopefully about 3.5 people a day, empower citizens and residents with the necessary information to make better informed decisions about their sexuality and protection against HIV and AIDS. Encourage people to take the Safe Sex Pledge via, physical signature, USSD or Mobi site, or the Mobi website. Upon signing a pledge, pledges will receive a condom and a Durex Red Stay Safe bracelet. Now the campaign will be activated through industrial theatre, will entail stopovers at popular venues within the communities to reach more people and further entrench sex education and awareness of severity of the epidemic. Now the question for me is how many people in South Africa at the moment, because I know there's been quite a few buses. I remember there was also the whole social laws, that thing that happened quite a while ago. I think it was Soul City, I'm not sure, I just kind of the name just left my mind. But anyway, they had a whole sort of movement program where they were going everywhere in the country. They're really trying to enforce safe sex and allowing people to really come for free condoms, also really understand how important it is for them to pledge and to understand that HIV is real, and there's so many ways in which you can prevent it. Now I wonder how many of us actually got that information, and if you got it from a bus or somebody, sort of these activations. In fact, what I'm really asking is how effective are these activations? Are we really getting to the grassroots levels of the people? Are we really speaking to them? Or are people just coming there to sort of get what they can get for free and move along? That's the question I need to sort of pose to you. What do you think is the impact of campaigns such as this one? I think it's quite interesting. I think it's always important to have a really good brand come together to really, I think, infiltrate a space where, HIV/AIDS, as much as many people don't speak about it as much, it's still really high in South Africa. So I know that the objectives of this partnership is to sort of drive sexual education, to fight HIV/AIDS in South Africa, amongst men and women, to highlight the importance of using a condom. In 2018, we're still highlighting the importance of using a condom. It's crazy. To encourage South Africans to take the Safe Sex Pledge and to strengthen brand affiliation with corporate SA, NGOs and departments. And I think it's important that, companies such as Durex, companies that are in the space of intimacy and sex, do use a brand to really showcase how they can contribute to one of the biggest issues in Africa at the moment. And I know they've got a few things that they want to really re-energize the youth in, which is obviously abstinence, the idea of being ready. What does that look like? Be prepared, preparing your people to understand why condoms are so important, to prevent sexually transmitted diseases, pregnancy and HIV and AIDS, but also just take some sort of action, take some sort of pledge, do something, commit to something that's going to make you not be vulnerable to getting HIV or AIDS in any capacity, whether it be, sexual or not. And I think that's what's important. But I also want to just know, from an impact perspective, how many people in South Africa have been touched by these sort of activations and has actually learned something and went with the tenacity and the will to learn, or are we just sort of passing it by and looking at it like another sort of activation? Are we actually looking at it in a way that is going to be beneficial to us? I remember also a while ago that there used to be some testing stations all around my university, out of it. And I used to go in there purposefully because I thought it was important. Obviously, it's very important to know your status, but it's also very important for you to understand what it means to be sexually unprotected, right? And the consequences of that. And that's what really always used to get me educated about my body and educated about the kinds of things and situations I put myself in as a female in South Africa in the time that we live in. So there have been, for me personally, there have been some great lessons learned in activations, particularly around HIV and AIDS and sex and sexual transmitted diseases, and trying to prevent that. But I just wonder, for you as the consumer, as a corporate, when you have your wellness day, when you have your when your children talk to you about, oh man, Durex came to our school today, what kind of conversations are you having, and what kind of conversations are being sparked, and are they really in a real way and actively changing the way in which young people, male or female, old people, male or female, understand and see sex in 2018? That's the question I have for you. And if you have any answers, feel free to let me know on the social show at Brand Live or otherwise, on our Instagram or on our Facebook page, and I will definitely take you into consideration. And hopefully we will speak to Dr. Gatlaleng a little bit later, maybe next week. Hopefully she'll be back in the country. I did have word that she's in America, and we were just struggling to get the line across. But I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I think there's so much more that can be done. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back after this.
What kind of things does a child deserve to have in his or her tiny hands? Probably a candy or a toy, or even better, a book and a pen. But what if this pen gets replaced by a gun? Imagine the horror of violence and abuse children are facing every day, and the kind of future we are building for them. In fact, 300,000 children are still working as militants in conflicting areas all around the world. They did not have a choice, but you do.
Again, my favorite part of the show, things to remember, the part of the show that if you listened to nothing, you heard nothing, at least remember this. Again, I'm on the same thread as my conversation, and the conversation I wanted to have with Dr. Tlaleng about HIV and AIDS and where we are and what's going on. And I'm just going to play a short clip around that as I depart from the show. But I think it's very important that we still talk about HIV in a way that is that has agency, and in a way that we can actually feel as though the brands that we do work with hear us and understand that it's important that they play their part as well. And I think Durex is one of those amazing brands that's really trying to educate South Africa's people and youth and everybody of the pleasure and the freedom of having really safe, enjoyable sex, right? But anyway, that concludes my show for the day. I'm going to play out with my things to remember clip. It's been amazing. I'll be back again next week with new, fresh CSI news. Don't go anywhere.
36.7 million people in the world have the HIV virus.
In 2016, it was reported that 7.1 million people living in South Africa have HIV.
That same year, 110,000 of those individuals died from AIDS-related causes.
You could be one of them.
There is free HIV testing at all government clinics and hospitals throughout South Africa.
Find out your status today.
It could save your life.
Live from 27 boxes in the heart of Melville, this is brandlive.coza.